Hey, folks, welcome to the most censored comedian journalist in the nation. I love how, so for those of you who don't know, my entire show has been canceled along with all of RT America, as well as my podcast was deleted from Spotify this past week. And my YouTube videos of Redacted Tonight are banned across Europe and the EU. So it's funny. Like I am literally actually censored or had my platforms some of them deleted, whereas you have like Dave Chappelle and other people claiming Joe Rogan's been canceled or whatever. They have the largest platforms in the fucking world. Dave Chappelle has a whatever $1 million deal with Netflix, one of the largest television video outlets on the planet, and people are like he's been canceled. No, they haven't. I've really been canceled. But you can, if you want to support my stuff and want to see videos like this, but also whatever project ends up replacing Redacted Tonight. If you want to see that continue, if you want to see it happen, please go to patreon.com/Lee Camp, and become a member. But I want to bring in the guest because this is an excellent guest, important guest, former UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter. I first became aware of him, as I think most people in the country did, when he was speaking out against the invasion of Iraq, which ultimately killed roughly 1 million people, according to the Lancet Medical Journal. And he was saying loud and clear that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And our mainstream media was not having it. They would basically bring him on and, sit 17 people around him to try and refute what he knew to be true. And I don't think any of them called up to say they were sorry afterwards when they saw that he was absolutely right all along. So he is also highly informed on what's going on right now. And let's bring him in. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Lee, just so you know, I'll be subscribing to your channel, so I'll be supporting you as best I can.
Thank you. Every bit counts nowadays. So I don't have to do Redacted Tonight on a street corner with a tin can. That's what comes next.
Although I'd like to watch that too.
Thank you. Actually, let's start off with that. Have you gotten any we're sorry notes from the mainstream media for not finding WMD in Iraq?
I mean, to be honest, I got a few.
Yeah.
I mean, they struggle because of the corporate. The corporations are loath to admit they were wrong or that they undertook, censorship of valid points of view, fact-based points of view. But they've come as strange as Bill O'Reilly. When I was on his show, he attacked me vociferously. I mean, hard. And at one point in time, he said, are you going to come on my air and apologize to the American people when Saddam Hussein uses chemical weapons against American troops and kills them and their bodies come home in body bag? I said, absolutely. But when we go in there and we find no weapons of mass destruction and find out we invaded a nation under false pretenses, are you going to invite me back on and you apologize to the American people for beating the drum of war? And in defense of Bill O'Reilly, he tried to get me on to do just that. Fox News would not allow it. But he, again, to his credit, he went on, I think it was ABC, whatever their morning program is. And he said, I tried to get him on. They won't let me, but I owe him an apology because he was absolutely right. So I give Bill O'Reilly credit for that. Whatever you think of the guy, and trust me, I'm not a big fan of his opinions. But when it came to, being a man about doing what he said he was going to do, he did. Wolf Blitzer once gave me sort of a backhanded, I'm sorry, and a couple other people at CNN did the same. But for the most part, no, they just ignored it, pretended it didn't happen.
So let's get into the current conflict. Mainstream media, again, getting plenty of it wrong, whether intentionally or unintentionally. We'll get into kind of what led up to this. I have covered some of that before the last week, but let's not bury the lead. Where do things stand now, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, we're 10 days into the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. It's a major military incursion. This is a major military operation. Russia may have sought to downplay it early on by calling it sensitive military operation or something of that nature. No, it's just an outright full-scale military invasion of a neighboring country. And we're 10 days into it. You know, somehow the mainstream media claims to have the Russian playbook, because I keep hearing that the plan isn't going according to that the invasion isn't going according to plan, that the Russian playbook is flawed, and all. When I look at it from a military perspective, and I spent a number of years early on in my career training to close with and destroy the Soviet army through firepower and maneuver. I mean, I know these guys. I've studied them for 35 years. Their doctrine, their equipment, their tactics, their operations. What we're seeing here is a classic multi-axis invasion that seeks to fix enemy forces in place, destroy enemy command and control, surround enemy forces, and seize strategic points of interest, bypassing built-up areas where the fighting would be too heavy, and just not getting ahead of the game. The rate of advance of this invasion is faster than the rate of advance of the German Blitzkrieg in World War II. So anybody's going, well, this is slow. No, it's the fastest advance in history. Especially really? If you consider that the Ukrainian army consists of 260,000 regular forces trained and equipped to NATO standards, with cohesive command and control, well-led officers, things of that nature, supported by another 300,000 reservists and auxiliaries. So the Russians came in with 200,000 troops facing off against 600,000 troops. Normally in a military campaign, you want a 3-to-1 advantage of troops on the offensive side. The Russians are coming in literally with a 1-to-3, 1-to-4 disadvantage. But being as it may, as of last week, casualties basically gave the Russians a 1-to-6 advantage. Normally in modern combat during World War II, the big battles of annihilation, the ratio was for one. Let's say the Germans were fighting the Americans and the Americans won. For every American killed, there'd be 1.2 to 1.4 Germans killed, and that ratio allowed the Americans to win the battle and push through. The Russians are killing Ukrainians at a rate of 1-to-6. For every Russian killed, 6 Ukrainians are dying. This is an absolute rout. An absolute rout. One of the things that appears to be slowing it down is the Russian stated intent of not killing Ukrainian soldiers. I was as surprised as anyone when they started this offensive with literally one hand tied behind their back, coming in very light, coming in very soft, trying to negotiate their way through built-up areas so as to reduce civilian casualties and reduce damage to civilian infrastructure. They also sought to not decapitate, meaning annihilate, Ukrainian soldiers in their barracks as they could have. Instead, they let them sleep, and they said, we just prefer that you stay in your barracks and don't fight us because our qualm isn't with you. Our qualm is with the bigger fish. Unfortunately for the Russians, the Ukrainians decided to fight, and they're fighting very effectively. I'm never going to denigrate the courage and the determination of the Ukrainian army. They're going up against a very well-trained Russian military, very well-equipped Russian military, who has superior tactics and operations, and they're doing it. The Ukrainians are putting up a very solid fight, but they're losing. They're losing decisively, and I think sooner rather than later, you're going to see large-scale surrenders as they run out of ammunition, they run out of food, they run out of water, they run out of fuel, and they're given the choice of either a futile resistance or death.
So something that has been said a lot by the mainstream media, which I just highlighted your tweet that nearly everything the mainstream media said about Russia's involvement in Syria has been wrong. So remember that as you're paying attention to what they're saying about Russia right now. One of the things they keep harping on is they keep saying in one instance after another that Russia or the Russian military is trying to kill civilians, is aiming at civilian targets, is claiming that there's a ceasefire and then shooting civilians. Uh, in your understanding, how much is the Russian military actually going after civilians?
The Russian military has foregone its greatest advantage in modern warfare, which is overwhelming fire superiority, or supremacy in this case. The normal Russian tactic is to fix your location and then obliterate your location with massed fires, artillery, multiple rocket launchers, mortars, and then steamroll through your location until they find the next location. Then you repeat as necessary. It's a very effective tactic. It's a very brutal tactic. It's one that, if applied to an enemy formation operating in a built-up area or a heavily populated suburban area, would result in tens of thousands of civilians dying. The Russians have foregone this. They're not using this tactic at all. When they do fire, it's based upon solid intelligence about enemy capabilities, enemy locations. Now, war is an imperfect science. I'll say that as somebody who's waged it. You think you have intelligence about a target. You do your best to put munitions on the target to achieve a desired effect, only to find out that you were wrong about the intelligence, or the munitions didn't perform as designed. And anytime there's a war in an area where civilians exist, the civilians pay the heaviest price, and that's happening now. But to call this a deliberate targeting by the Russians is just an absolute deviation from reality. The Russians are being very, very circumspect in their use of weapons. When they use weapons, for instance, in Kharkov, they show multiple rocket launchers impacting in a residential neighborhood. What they're not telling you is that the Russians had sent in a reconnaissance mission earlier that got ambushed and annihilated by Ukrainian forces dug in that residential area. This makes it a legitimate military target. I'm sorry, that's what war is. If you choose to fight in a residential area, then you can't. It's not a war crime to take that out. The Russians. I think the one place that the Russians are failing right now is the propaganda aspect. I'm not saying that I want the Russians to lie, but it would be nice if the Russians put some perspective to what they're facing. What they're facing isn't just propaganda from the Ukrainian government. Understand that the CIA is deeply embedded with the Ukrainian Ministry of Information and is responsible for running what's called a information operation. This is a covert direct action, not direct, a covert political action operation that's been sanctioned by the President of the United States. And the reason why it has to be sanctioned is the CIA normally isn't allowed to manipulate information in a manner that affects the American public. Meaning they can tell lies, and they do this very effectively, but they can't tell lies in a way that affects how the Americans view a subject. They're doing that right now. They're running a disinformation, or I call it disinformation, but it's an information operation, very sophisticated, that's designed to achieve a political result in Russia, meaning the goal is actually regime change. They want to overthrow Vladimir Putin by creating civil dissent that leads to, and they match that civil dissent with an economic sanctions policy and implementation, which is designed to marry up. The sanctions aren't happening in a vacuum. The sanctions are specifically targeted against a certain class of person in Moscow whom they want to, who the United States feels is oriented towards the West, and by depriving them of the benefits of being affiliated with the West, you redefine their life. And now they want them to rise up and remove Saddam. This is a regime change operation. So Ukraine isn't just about exaggerating Ukrainian victories, as all militaries do, or diminishing Russian victories. It's about manipulating information in Russia and in Europe to get NATO. Remember, NATO was this dysfunctional organization reeling from the catastrophe of Afghanistan. How do you get them aligned with what's going on? How do you get them to oppose what the Russians are doing? You have to run an information operation designed to manipulate public opinion in Europe. And the indirect effect of this is that the American public is likewise impacted by this, because you can't have a situation where the CIA promulgates mistruths over here, right, and then tells CNN, hey, yep, that's all a lie. That's all I do. You can't report that. That's a lie. You need to report the truth. No, they're letting the lie live. And this can only be done with executive permission. The President of the United States, therefore, is engaged in an operation to deceive the American public. And that's what people need to know.
And I thought one of your other posts is perhaps, speaking of these lies, is perhaps one of the most censored or covered up aspects of all of this right now. You tweeted out, at this stage, any continuation of the Ukraine-Russian conflict will not alter the outcome and will only increase the tragic plight of the Ukrainian people. All those who argue in favor of more weapons and insurgency must admit they care more about NATO than the Ukrainian people. So ironically, that while our media and our government agencies are manifesting, are creating this care, the concern for the Ukrainian people, its end result is that you're going to have more Ukrainian people getting killed because they're going to drag this thing out as long as possible.
Yes, and this comes back to one of the root causes of this conflict, which is NATO's effort to expand further east and incorporate Ukraine into the umbrella of NATO membership, and Ukraine's suicidal insistence that this is what they want, even though they and NATO were confronted over the course of 15 years. This isn't like Vladimir Putin woke up one night and went, "Oh, I got a headache, I'm going to invade Ukraine." This is concerted policy from Russia that has been articulated in great detail since Vladimir Putin addressed the Munich Security Conference in 2007. He laid down the foundation and said further eastward expansion is unacceptable. What did NATO do? They turned around in 2008. I think it was the Bucharest conference, and they invited Ukraine and Georgia to become members. This prompted a detailed Russian response, which was effectively captured by the U.S. ambassador to Russia at the time, William Burns. He happens to be the CIA director today, but back then he was the U.S. ambassador to Russia. He wrote a memorandum called "Niet means Niet," published in February 2009. And what he said is, the Russians have said, no, this is a red line. And then he said, this is a reasonable red line. I mean, we have to respect the Russians' perspective on this one. Ukraine, if it becomes a NATO member, will cause serious problems for Russia. So serious, and again, 2009, that Russia will use military force, destroy Ukraine, seize Crimea, and seize the Donbass. Well, good Lord, what has happened today? And people are saying this is because Putin woke up with a migraine. No, this is because NATO and Ukraine conspired together to create the conditions for a war that they knew 13 years ago was inevitable if they continued this policy.
Right. And a lot of people don't seem to understand that both things can be true. What Russia's doing is wrong. It can be illegal under international law. You can be opposed to it. And also, but you can see how NATO pushed Russia closer and closer to doing this, ignored their concerns, ignored their security concerns. NATO is, I think, 17 countries now. There's been several different moments in time where it's grown, and NATO and Russia is now surrounded by an enemy military alliance in many ways. And you were talking about 2009. Then in 2014, we see the Maidan coup, which the U.S. Backed, helped fund, and it involved heavy Nazi power that really made it happen. And we put in a U.S. friendly kind of puppet government, or at least U.S. friendly government.
No, literally a puppet government.
Yeah.
Yats is my man. Remember Victoria Nuland?
Yeah.
Yats is my man. Well, he became prime minister.
and so then there's an election that puts in Zelenskyy, and I want to know. So we know there's been fighting for the entire 8 years in the Donbass. Nazis killing 15,000 people, but people go, well, Zelensky's Jewish, so clearly you're making this stuff up. How much power do the Nazi brigades, battalions have in Ukraine now?
Well, let's just start again with the roots, what you said, 2014. The Maidan Revolution started out as the Maidan peaceful protest, where there were, Ukraine at the time was going through a very controversial internal debate over, do we align with the European Union or do we align with Russia? And it had been a debate that had been going on for more than 10 years, since 2004. And the current president at the time, Yushchenko, I think, Lukashenko's Belarusia. The president at the time, I'm getting senile, so these things slip my mind, had made the decision that he was going to side with Russia. And so there was a significant portion of the Ukrainian population who had a gripe, and they peacefully demonstrated. This was seized upon by the United States and the European Union, who empowered this radical nationalistic ideology that is headquartered in Lvov, Western Ukraine. And you have to understand the history of Ukraine to know that that's an artificial appendage of Ukraine that was given to Ukraine at the end of the Second World War by Russia. It used to be part of Poland. It has more historical identity with the Austro-Hungarian Empire than it does with Kiev. That's just a reality. But these people were brought in. There was an 8-year insurgency fought, led by the CIA, by these people against the Russians from 45 to 53. 300,000 people lost their lives, 30,000 Russian or Soviet security forces. I mean, this is major league warfare. These people do not like Moscow. They hate Moscow. They do like a guy named Stepan Bandera. These are the people that when the Germans came across in 1941, greeted them literally with song and flowers. They signed up by the hundreds of thousands to fight for Nazi Germany. They formed the death squads that killed the Jews. Babi Yar in Kiev, where 30,000 Jews were killed. The triggers were pulled by Ukrainian auxiliary policemen from Western Ukraine. I mean, these are not the kind of people you want dating your sister or anything like that. These are bad people. And they continue to exist today, and the U.S. empowered them. They came and they turned the Maidan demonstration into the Maidan Revolution, a violent revolution, an extraordinarily violent revolution, which when they ousted the Ukrainian president, they didn't have the political numbers, because overall in Ukraine they're a minority. They can't garner, more than, I think the most they ever got was like 12% of the vote. Generally they're single digits, but they're very violent. And they threatened every single Ukrainian politician since then with death if they do anything that infringes on their nationalistic platform, which was to restrict Russian speakers. These are the guys that burned people to death in Odessa in May of 2014, shoving 150 people into a building, lighting it on fire, killing between 40 and 50 of them. These are the people that slaughtered people in the streets in Kharkov. These are the people that began the fighting in Donetsk and Lugansk. These are the people that tried to expend their fighting into Crimea. These are very violent people. And when the fighting started in the Donbass and people were looking for a solution, this group called the Normandy Format, Germany, France, Ukraine, with Russia as sort of as a overseer, met, and they came up with what's called the Minsk Accords, 2015. When the fighting first started in Lugansk and Donetsk, the Russian speakers there wanted to declare independence, and Putin said, "No, you're part of Ukraine. You're part of Ukraine, but I will defend you. I will defend your right to be Russians." The Minsk Accords was designed to give them special autonomy so that they could protect their cultural and linguistic, but they would be politically part of Ukraine. A reasonable settlement to end the fighting. The nationalists said no. And so when Poroshenko, who was the president at the time, came back, the nationalists literally said, "We will kill you if you implement this." And literally, I mean, it wasn't like a fun, we have January 6th here, that horrible day in American democracy where a demonstration turned into a riot that assaulted the Capitol, and we call that an insurrection. In Ukraine, every single president lives under the threat of imminent insurrection should he do anything that deviates from the platform of the far right-wing neo-Nazis. Zelenskyy was elected president on a platform of peace. He got 80% of the
a comedian actor.
Well, let's talk about that. Zelenskyy is a politician. He was a popular comedian with a popular show about being president. This is if America decided that during the height of West Wing, we're going to elect Martin Sheen.
Right.
Because he's presidential. No, he's an actor. Zelensky's an actor. He's not stupid. He's a lawyer. He's trained as a lawyer. but he was handpicked by his billionaire oligarch mentor who owns the media empire that made Zelenskyy famous. So Zelensky's on a TV show that this guy pays for. Zelenskyy performs in programs underwritten by this guy. Zelenskyy is literally the puppet of this oligarch, and this oligarch picks Zelenskyy to go up against Poroshenko, who is one of the most unpopular presidents at the time. Zelenskyy wins by supporting a platform of peace. The implication was he would go forward with Minsk. No sooner did he get elected than the guy came in and said, "You'll be hanging by the neck until dead," that one of the neo-Nazis. "We will kill you." Not an idle threat. They will kill him because these neo-Nazis are everywhere. They formed this brigade-sized force called Azov, and that got broken up as part of the agreement with the West that you can't have these standalone Nazi militias. So what did they do? Disband them? No. They put a battalion in every brigade in the Ukrainian military. So every brigade in the Ukrainian military now has a battalion of Nazis. Then they infiltrated their officers throughout the officer corps and the general staff. They are everywhere. They're in the security service, the intelligence service, the military. They've infiltrated the whole thing. And these are people who aren't afraid to kill in defense of their ideology. So Zelenskyy is 100% the puppet of these people. One of the reasons why he has such a hardline position today is he can't take a soft line. You want proof? One of the members of the first negotiating team that met with the Russians, I don't know his name right off the top of my head, but he was somebody who said maybe we should think about neutrality to bring an end to this war. What happened to him when he got back? Pulled out, shot 2 times in the head, assassinated. Take a look at the photographs. The Nazis killed a negotiator because they didn't like his negotiating position.
Wow. Yeah, you don't get that context on CNN. So for those who really want to see this end, and I don't mean the kind of faux outrage, let's put our Ukrainian colors on the thumbnail of our Facebook account and that's it. But I mean genuinely want to see this over because that's the only way you're going to see killing stop. What is it? How do you see this ending? What needs to happen?
Well, I'm just going to be brutally honest. This will end when Vladimir Putin wants it to end, which means it'll end when the Russians achieve total victory. Now, Russian total victory isn't, Nazi total victory or Roman total victory where you kill every man and steal the women and enslave the children. Total victory is exactly what the Russian negotiators have said. This war will end the moment Ukraine changes its constitution, because one of the things Zelenskyy did is change the constitution so that NATO membership is now constitutionally required. So the Russians said, change your constitution and then enter into a formal neutrality agreement recognized by everybody. You are neutral. You will never join NATO. Except that Crimea is forever Russia, except the independence of Lugansk and Donetsk, and de-NATO your military. People keep saying, well, Ukraine wasn't a NATO member. Well, pretty much. They had a regular army of 240,000 guys who were trained, equipped. They wore the uniforms of NATO.
And
last year, well, now we are. Last year, we sent 20,000 NATO troops into Ukraine to train them. We sent, I think, around 12,000 Ukrainian troops outside of Ukraine to train with NATO in every country in Europe. They use the same tactics, the same communication, the same weapons. They wear the uniforms. They are a proxy army of NATO. And so the Russian perspective is, we can't have a NATO proxy here. So your military is going bye-bye. You could create another military, but it's not going to be a NATO proxy. It'll be a Ukrainian military, probably equipped by us. So our advisors are there. I mean, I'm not saying the Russians are right, but that's their position. You're not going to be part of NATO. And then the last thing is denazification. That's the most difficult one because it pretty much means that anybody that's in the military, police, security service, whatever that possesses, has to go. And by go, the Russians mean die. These aren't people that are going to be given mercy. Some of their leaders might be given a trial and put in jail. But if you got a swastika tattooed on your body, you're going to die when you're captured. And I know that's a violation of Geneva Convention. I know I'm just stating the simple fact.
Yeah.
And then about the political groups that have formed, they must be disbanded, and Ukrainian law must be rewritten so that it outlaws worship of Stepan Bandera, outlaws celebration of the 12th SS division, which I think was the Galatian division where the Ukrainians served. Basically, it bans in a similar fashion to what Germany did at the end of the Second World War by banning, continued adulation of Adolf Hitler and embrace of Nazi memorabilia. Ukraine has to go through the same thing regarding Stepan Bandera.
That's what the U.S. was one of 3 countries to vote against when it went in front of the UN was Nazi glorification.
Yeah, because if we voted for that, we would be basically humiliating the Ukrainian government, because it is a government that resides over a nation that glorifies Nazi ideology. I mean, I'm just saying it as it is.
Yeah. So last question here. I saw you, I think on another show maybe a week ago saying that it doesn't seem that the U.S. government has prepared for what all these sanctions will ultimately mean economically, and perhaps it doesn't appear that Putin prepared for it either. How do you see economically this playing out?
Well, actually, I think Putin is prepared very well. I mean, there's only so much you can do when you live in a world where the dollar dominates, where U.S. banking institutions are controlled by Washington. Where global banking institutions are controlled by Washington, D.C.
Yep.
There's only so much preparation you can do. Understand that the Russians have yet to unleash their counterattack, which they say is coming. But we're getting certain hints about this. Russia has, I think, is moving towards the gold standard for the ruble, which will radically change everything, because now it makes the ruble a denomination that can be traded on the international stage because it's linked to gold, as opposed to the U.S. dollar that's linked to $60 trillion of debt. And you're going to see the deconstruction of the dollar monopoly, and that's one of the things that Russia and China are working. The Russians don't do anything half. I don't know what I'm allowed to say on your show, but
anything you want.
Half-assed. There's nothing half-assed about the Russians. They're not always right. The decisions they make aren't always the brightest, but you need to respect the fact that they don't act on a whim. When the Russians undertake a policy such as going into Ukraine, they have staffed out all possible ramifications, knowing full well that there were going to be economic sanctions levied on. Why? Because Biden's been telling them for more than a year. Yeah. And so they have anticipated everything. They have game played everything. They have options for everything. One of the things that Biden didn't game play is look at the price of gas in Europe right now. From what I read, Michelin tires out of France had to shut down production because they can't afford to continue to operate with the energy prices. You're going to see more and more European industries shut down because they can't afford to go. Europe's going to shut down, and Russia hasn't shut off gas. So just imagine when Putin's waiting there going, wait for it, boom, done. Now what are you going to do, Europe? You're going to die, and it's your fault. The United States right now is in a panic about oil. Hell, we're trying to talk to the Iranians to sell us oil now.
And
Maduro, a delegation to Venezuela to recognize Maduro. I feel sorry for Juan Guaido because he thought he was president of Venezuela. No, he's not. Apparently, Nicolas Maduro is, because that's who we're talking to. And meanwhile, the price of oil is going through the roof. Somebody just came out and said, you're going to be paying $300 a barrel if you're not careful. And Russia hasn't done a damn thing. Russia is holding on to so many cards right now. And when they start slapping them down, they're going to pick us apart at the seams. They're going to suffer. There's no doubt about it. I have family in Moscow. My wife's brother and his family live there, and they are suffering. There's no doubt that they're suffering. But Russia will survive. It'll be tough. They'll tighten their belt. It won't be easy. Europe, on the other hand, isn't going to survive. And let's just look at one last thought here. Vladimir Putin has been in power for 22 years, 23 years. Okay. Find me his Western counterpart that's been in power half that long. Every single person that's opposing him right now, of these democracies, will be out of office before Vladimir Putin leaves office. Most of them will be out of office this time next year because of the political ramifications of the decisions they made regarding sanctions, Russia, and Ukraine. All these people that are painting, as you said, their fingernails and their eyelids and all this stuff, you can do that when you have food in your belly, heat in your stove, electricity in your house. You can do that when trucks are delivering things to your markets. That's not going to be happening soon in Europe. And Europe's going to be wondering how they're going to. I'd like to see Germany tell me how they're going to pay the $100 billion to modernize their military when their economy's in the toilet.
Yeah.
Mr. Scholz doesn't have long for political office. He's doomed. And Russia hasn't even begun to play their cards. When they do, my prediction is Europe will be all but knocked out, and you're going to rapidly see Europe reversing course. You've already seen some of that, where Germany has just come out and said, we can't stop, we have to have Russian energy pouring in. We can't stop it. But Germany's already set Russia up where they can stop it if they want to through violation of contracts. Germany now has to be careful with what the United States does, because anything that's seen as a contractual violation gives the Russian 100% legal reason to shut down the energy. Russia owns Europe right now. Now, Russia has always played it smart by saying, we don't play the energy card. They didn't. Who played the energy card first? The West. And the West is going to pay. That's my prediction.
Well, just so much there to think about. I mean, and so much context that we just can't get almost anywhere. It's insane. And now they've purged with some of the few outlets where you could get that type of context. Most people don't know. I was about to have you on Redacted tonight.
Wouldn't it have been wonderful to have this conversation on your show where it could have reached millions? Wouldn't it have been nice for that?
Yeah. And now that's shut down because apparently the U.S. can't handle any dissenting opinions. But thank you so much, Scott Ritter. Such a pleasure. I know you have a Twitter. Is there a way people can follow your work?
That's pretty much it. Just right now on Twitter. I'm very I'm still primitive in my social media stuff.
That's all right. Well, thanks, and I'll sure have you back soon. Really appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
So there is Scott Ritter, and incredible guest, incredibly informed on all these issues. Like I said, if you missed the beginning, he's a former UN weapons inspector, and he got everything right about the war on Iraq when everyone said he was wrong and he was out of his mind. But anyway, so just to wrap up here, those are the type of interviews I do if you're new to what I do, and the type of people I try and talk to. So if you support that, if you support those type of conversations, if you think they're important, then please go to patreon.com/Lee Camp. I have not pressed this type of thing before in many years because I had a TV show, Redacted Tonight, and that, I didn't need to make it about Patreon, but now that is the only way that a continued show will be funded. So if you want to see this continued, then, now's the time to kind of show it. And we're not talking major amounts of money. Honestly, if it's just $5 a month, then that's awesome. That's patreon.com/Lee Camp. And you get all these, nice little perks, such as exclusive interviews. You'll get videos early before everybody else. And yeah, there's many things to grab over there. If you sign up at a couple of the levels, you get a free PDF of my book, Bullet Points and Punchlines. So yeah, thanks a lot for your time. And I'll be doing these more regularly, and keep fighting.